Podcast. This is episode 378. We're talking about the NFL season previews for 2022 for the NFC South and the AFC South divisions. Joined once again by Jacob Camenker from the Sporting News. Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here talking about the South divisions. Last week, we were in lockstep with how we viewed the West pretty much. Give or take a couple differences, but albeit minor. So let's see if we're in the same boat this week. I think last week we were looking at the best divisions in the NFL, or two of them. And this week we are looking at two of the worst divisions in the NFL. So I'm interested to see how these will shake out.
Yeah, but we will get two playoff teams at the very least from these divisions, so they're worth talking about. And I like how, we agreed a lot last week, and our biggest disagreement was like 2 wins for one of the teams. So, we were in lockstep, like you said, but maybe we'll have some different opinions this time. We'll see. I'm pretty sure I know your opinion on some of these teams, but maybe not all of them. So looking forward to talking about that. Before we do, please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video. Visit the link in the description for the merch store. I am wearing a navy blue Walter football shirt, and just dawned on me this might be the 3rd time in a row I'm wearing this shirt. No, I am not a slob. It's just a really cool shirt. So you can get it by visiting the link in the description. I think it's like $20. So that would help us out a lot. Let's get to these divisions. Let's start with the NFC South, because that's the Buccaneers. I feel like we'll agree that they're the best team that we're going to talk about today. We had some news today that Rob Gronkowski announced his retirement once again. Not sure if it's permanent. Will not be surprised if he comes back as soon as training camp ends. But we'll see. Maybe he's retired for good. So with that in mind, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Gronkowski is retired. He's not coming back this year. Do you really think that impacts the Buccaneers a lot? And if so, do you see them? How far do you think they'll go in the playoffs?
I think that they could easily make a Super Bowl run with or without Gronkowski. Obviously, you're better with Gronkowski. He's the best tight end to ever play the game. People talk about the receiving ability and how, Travis Kelce in recent years has put up more receiving numbers, but Gronkowski is the most well-rounded tight end of all time. He's an elite blocker, and he's a great pass catcher too, and a huge red zone threat. So they will miss him from that standpoint, especially early in the season when Chris Godwin is out of the lineup recovering from that ACL injury. Brady's going to have just fewer weapons to work with, but I think by the time they get to the postseason, if Gronkowski does stay retired, Brady will have found some new targets and new ways to target the tight end position. They still have Cameron Brate, who is the commensurate veteran. He should fill in just fine there. And the Bucs prepared for the departure or potential departure of Gronkowski. They drafted Cade Otton and Co Kieft in the 4th and 6th rounds of this year's draft. So they could be ready to pitch in as role players. I think both are project as good blockers. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that they both have good blocking skills. So Brady will hold the fort there, but they have decent depth at the tight end position. So we'll see how they do. And like you said, I'm not convinced Gronkowski's fully done. He might be retired for now, but say the Bucs start the year like 10-2 and Tom Brady comes calling in December and is like, Gronk, we need you to win this division. Gronk might drop everything and say, hey, I could play for a couple months and try to get another ring. So it's possible that could happen. I'm not going to hold my breath for it, but don't rule out Gronk at this point. He's retired for now, but we've seen guys change their mind, and we've seen him change his mind before. So see what happens there. I mean, the rest of the Bucs team, this is pretty much the same core that they've run it back with the last couple of years. They've done a great job keeping their guys around. They lost both of their starting guards, which would normally be a little concerning, but they traded for Shaq Mason, who's one of the best guards in the game. He'll replace Alex Kappa with no problem. Losing Ali Marpet at left guard will be a little bit of a bigger problem because he was a stellar player. He retired, and it does not sound like he's coming back. But the team drafted Luke Gedeke, and they have Aaron Stinney at the left guard position. I think Stinney started when they won the Super Bowl a couple years ago. I think he was in place of Kappa, who was injured at the time. So he has some high-end experience. So, I mean, you're talking about one weaker link replacement that we need to see how he'll do there. But I think that their line looks fine. They have Tom Brady. They're good. Their defense, pretty much the same unit as last year. They replaced Ndamukong Suh with Akeem Hicks, which looks like an upgrade at this point in their careers. So really nothing to complain about there. They lost Jordan Whitehead too, but they got Logan Ryan. So That pretty much the way to put it is anywhere they've lost a veteran player, they've replaced them with another veteran player. So I'm comfortable with this team. I think that they're going to win double-digit games easily. I think that they should run away with the NFC South compared to the other teams in the division. So I really like them, and I do think that they can win the Super Bowl this year. Any team that has Tom Brady will be in the Super Bowl discussion, and this team is firmly within it, especially considering how weak the rest of the NFC is.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it really helps them, like you said, that they have a weak conference that they're in. If they were in a tougher conference, I'd be way more bearish on them because they're not as good as the team that won the Super Bowl. Like that team had Antonio Brown and a healthy Chris Godwin plus Mike Evans and Gronkowski. We'll see if he comes back. I think you're right in that he will be back at some point. Maybe if it's after training camp, or it could be late in the year. I feel like the only people who are going to be hurt by this are the people who draft Cameron Brate and are hoping to have him during their fantasy playoff run, and they're going to have to find another tight end. But with Antonio Brown, he's gone. I know they signed Russell Gage. He's not nearly as good, obviously. Gronkowski, Gronkowski being gone, it hurts as well. Brate is not as good as Gronkowski. Akeem Hicks is an upgrade over Sue at this point. But Logan Ryan is not as good as Jordan Whitehead. So they're a little bit worse in all these areas, but they don't have much competition in the conference, and especially the division. I mean, I have the odds at the bottom right here. If you're listening on iTunes, the Buccaneers are minus 333 to win the division, and rightfully so. I don't think another team's even close to them. Maybe one team if they make a trade, but as it stands right now, the Buccaneers should win easily. It's just a matter of I feel like if they suffer some injuries, I think they could be in trouble because I don't think they're very deep. And also once they get to the Super Bowl, or I should say, if they get to the Super Bowl, I think they're going to be outclassed by whomever they play. But then again, it is only one game. Anything can happen. And, Tom Brady might be an underdog, which is going to be very appealing, when we get to bet that game. So, I like the Buccaneers. How many wins do you think they'll get around?
I have them listed in my initial projections as a 13-win team. Part of that is because they're playing in the NFC South, and really they should beat up on that division. They should get at least 5 wins in those games. I know Brady has struggled against the Saints, and that will make some people say, well, if he loses to them twice again, that'll be a big problem. But they don't have Sean Payton anymore, so I think that's going to make things a little bit different. The Saints just in general are a little weaker. So, I think they're going to go about 13-4. And I know that their depth is worse in some areas, but it's weirdly better at receiver than it was during the playoffs last year, because I think Russell Gage at the third receiver spot, he's not an upgrade over Antonio Brown. But late in the year, when they didn't have Godwin and didn't have Brown, no one else stepped up aside from Mike Evans. So I think adding Gage there to be the number 2 until Godwin comes back and be the number 3, that allows guys like Rashad Perriman, Tyler Johnson, Scotty Miller to be backup caliber players and role players, which just suits them better. So I think one area that they've done well is that receiver, just addressing the depth there. And, that's a lot of that's contingent on Godwin coming back healthy eventually, but I think that they're positioned to be competitive at that group, more competitive than they were last year during the playoffs. Again, Brown was better for them, but I do think that Gage's signing is a little underrated in my opinion.
I agree. I mean, I like Gage, but missing Brown, I think is a huge deal. We saw what happened to them in the playoffs, and they really that. The year they won the Super Bowl, they started off kind of a little sluggishly. I know they're winning some games, but remember they got blown out by the Saints. I know they have trouble beating the Saints, but they really got trashed by the Saints, and they really didn't hit their stride until Antonio Brown got to the team, and then it was kind of incorporated into the passing game. That's when they really took off, and they kind of. They ran the table in the playoffs. They were great. They destroyed the Chiefs. I mean, that was very impressive. But without Brown, they're just not nearly as dynamic. But still, like we said, they're in an easy conference. I've been winning 12 games, so we're pretty close to each other once again. If there's a team that can challenge the Buccaneers, let's say the Buccaneers have several injuries at key positions, and there's a team that rallies and may steal the division away from the Buccaneers, which of these other 3 will it be?
It's got to be the Carolina Panthers, in my opinion. And I know a lot of people's gut instinct will say, oh, it's got to be the Saints. And the odds reflect that. The Saints have plus 349 odds to win the division, according to the stats you have up on the screen here. The Panthers are plus 1291. So, a lot of people are thinking, or at least sportsbooks are thinking, people would be more willing to bet the Saints to upset the Buccaneers. But I think that the Panthers are the better bet. And look, there's nothing exciting about betting Sam Darnold and PJ Walker and Matt Corral to be the team that upsets Brady and the Buccaneers. I get that. But the fact of the matter is, this is the team that is poised to either get Baker Mayfield or Jimmy Garoppolo during this offseason. I know we've been saying that for months at this point, but it's one of those guys is going to shake loose unless something shocking happens, unless the NFL suspends Deshaun Watson for a full year and the suspension is upheld and the Browns can reconcile with Mayfield after that trade, and Mayfield isn't just like, hey, screw you guys, you went and traded for some guy when I was on the team and wouldn't let me go, I'm not playing for you. He's going to be available. And then the 49ers and Jimmy Garoppolo is a little less certain, but we know they want to move on to Trey Lance and see what he can do. So Garoppolo should shake free at some point. Either way, the point is one of these teams or one of these quarterbacks is going to be available. No team is in better position than the Panthers to get them because they've been in the talks with basically every quarterback. They were in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. They were looking at Russell Wilson. They were looking at Matthew Stafford before the Rams got him. So, I mean, that they're going to be willing to sacrifice for a quarterback, and they should for multiple reasons. One, Matt Rule's on the hot seat. He is the most likely coach to get fired according to the latest betting odds. I think I saw from Bet Online AG that he's the favorite at plus 300 now to be the first coach fired. I haven't looked at other sports books. I just saw that on Twitter today. So he knows that he's on a short leash this season. So he wants an upgraded quarterback. The other thing is this roster outside of the quarterback position is really good. Yeah, I mean, this is an underrated team. I mean, they started 3-0 last year with Sam Darnold, and they had some buzz around them. People were starting to get excited. And then all of a sudden, Christian McCaffrey gets hurt. Sam Darnold starts playing poorly, and the wheels fell off. And now people are down on them. But if you look at this team, they have two great receivers in DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. They really like Tommy Tremble, their second-year tight end. That's why they traded Dan Arnold midseason. Christian McCaffrey, big if he can stay healthy, but I mean, he's one of the most dynamic three-down running backs in the league. Most importantly on offense, though, as you can expect, because it's me talking, the offensive line, they've made upgrades to. Their biggest weakness last year outside of quarterback was their protection. They now have Ike Ekwonu. They drafted him in the first round. He'll be a massive upgrade at left tackle. They signed Bradley Bozeman to play center and Austin Corbett to play right guard. Two very good starters for a team that had minimal talent on the interior line. Now those two will pair with Taylor Moton to make a solid right side of the line. And Ekwonu at left tackle is going to be just a huge upgrade there. So the real weak spot is at left guard, where they have Brady Christensen's penciled in on the depth chart I'm looking at. He was a third-round pick last year and played tackle, but they have several options that they can play at the position. But this was a team that started Cam Irving last year at left tackle. So getting Ekwonu there is huge. And I think the better blocking will help whoever's at quarterback, be it Mayfield, Garoppolo, Darnold, or Matt Corral, who has some explosive arm talent and playmaking ability. So even if you're just stuck with the group they have at quarterback, Corral has enough upside that they could potentially be a sneaky playoff team. And defensively, they have a really good pass rush. Brian Burns is an excellent player. Matt Ioannidis, who they got from Washington, is going to make a big difference up front. He played for Matt Rule at Temple, I believe. J.C. Horn is back. He missed most of his rookie year with an injury, but he looked really good before he left the field. And that defense just has so much young talent and depth on it that I think they're going to be surprisingly good to some people. Some people aren't going to realize how bad the offense made it on them last year, but they're going to be really good and just have a chance to beat some of the lower rung teams so long as Darnold doesn't turn the ball over. And so long as Darnold can stay clean, they'll have a chance to upset some teams too. So I really like the Panthers this year. They're a playoff sleeper. I don't know if they quite get in without making a move at quarterback, but they're definitely a team to consider betting their over win total. We've talked about this before, but I think they're at 6 or 6.5. They should have a really good chance to do that. They could have a winning record. So I like them a lot this year.
Yeah, I do too. And I think even if they don't make a move at quarterback, I think they could make the playoffs. I think they'd be on the cusp. Now, if they make a move for Mayfield or Garoppolo, that I think that greatly increases their chances of making the playoffs and potentially winning this division. I mean, plus 1291. I mean, we talk about the odds after each division. I mean, I can tell you right now, I like that a lot. Like, I'm considering betting that. Just because like you never know what happens. Like the Buccaneers could suffer like several injuries, and suddenly the Panthers look pretty good. I think this team. I want to hear your opinion on this. This team reminds me a lot of the what was it, the 2020 Browns. Now the Browns in 2019, they had a lot of hype. They were like 8-1 to win the Super Bowl. Like everyone was betting them. It was insane, and like we were like. Why? I mean, they had Greg Robinson at left tackle. They had a terrible offensive line for the most part. Baker Mayfield had a nice rookie year, so I think that was like the like part of the hype. And obviously they had Myles Garrett. They had a lot of young, promising players. But that 2019 Browns team really disappointed just because they couldn't block at all. And Mayfield had a terrible year. Now go ahead one season like ahead of that in 2020, the Browns did a great job of retooling their offensive line, and suddenly Baker Mayfield played extremely well. The Browns got to the second round of the playoffs and they almost beat the Chiefs. So I think this Panthers team reminds me a lot of that, because last year they were 3-0 and they were getting some hype. Now they beat some bad teams. I mean, they beat the Jets in week 1. They beat a Saints team that was missing their entire coaching staff in week 2. And then they beat the Texans in week 3. So it's kind of a fraudulent 3-0. And then it didn't help that McCaffrey got hurt in week 3. But still, I mean, this team has talent. Like you talked about their defensive players, their pass rush especially, their cornerbacks really good. I like that they added Xavier Woods as well. The receivers, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson. It's a team with a lot of good players, but they just couldn't block last year, and that was a huge problem. And now they're going to be able to block. I mean, you talked about the upgrades they made on the offensive line, and they like Christensen. So if he's a good left guard, you can make an argument that they have a top 5 offensive line, assuming Ekwonu like pans out. I guess you never know. We haven't seen him play in the NFL. But if he pans out and has like at least a solid rookie year, kind of like the Browns with a rookie left tackle as well that in 2020. I think the Panthers are looking really good, especially if they make a move at quarterback. And even if they don't, I think Sam Darnold, as crazy as it sounds, could have a semi-decent year. I don't like Darnold at all, but with a much better offensive line, he's going to look a lot better. He struggled last year because he didn't have any blocking in front of him. Plus McCaffrey was out. So if the Panthers offensive line is as good as we think it could be, and McCaffrey stays healthy, I think the Panthers will make the playoffs even with Darnold. And now they have even more upside with Mayfield or Garoppolo. So I like the Panthers a lot. I'm right there with you. I think they win 10 plus games. And I think they're 10 to you can get 10-1 odds on FanDuel for them to win 10 plus games right now. I think it's a great bet to make.
Yeah, that's a bet that I would definitely be willing to make as well. Currently, I have them projected at 9-8, but that is just because I wanted to split the difference between them keeping Sam Darnold and Matt Corral at quarterback and getting Baker Mayfield, Jimmy Garoppolo type. I think their range right now for me is 7 to 11 wins. So having them at 9 makes sense because we're not sure what's going to happen at quarterback. But if they get Baker Mayfield, and I love his fit in Carolina, I think he'd be perfect for that team. I would like them as a 10, maybe 11 win team. So I agree with you. I think that is a good bet. And if you just look at their start of the season too, they could get out of the gates pretty quickly because they played the Browns at home. And that's a game where Deshaun Watson almost certainly won't be able to play given the extra recent allegations and the fact that the NFL will almost certainly suspend him. And we don't know if Baker Mayfield's going to be willing to play. So that's Jacoby Brissett with a good roster around him versus Sam Darnold and Matt Corral currently with a good roster around them. So that's a more even matchup than people realize. Then they play the Giants, Saints, and Cardinals the next 3 weeks. The Saints and Cardinals games are at home. So the Panthers could go 3-1, maybe even 4-0 if things break in their favor. That game against the Cardinals won't be easy because I think they crushed the Cardinals last year when Kyler Murray was out. That was a classic.
That was the Cam Newton on back game.
That's right. It was. And that was the second start consecutively, I think, for Colt McCoy. So the Cardinals were kind of like, all right, we got our win for Colt last week. So that maybe that one doesn't go as well. But the first 3 games at least look very winnable once again. So maybe they start well this year and they don't completely collapse down the stretch.
Yeah, I like it a lot. So you mentioned the Saints earlier. You mentioned Sean Payton not being there as a reason why people shouldn't be as high on them. Are there other reasons why you think the Saints might disappoint in relation to where other people have them projected?
Yeah, they've just lost so much talent over the last couple of years. They've been in cap hell and they keep finding ways around it. They keep keeping some guys and finding ways to sign players like Jarvis Landry, who should help because they needed a number 3 receiver. And, they helped replace Marcus Williams with Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu. But the fact of the matter is they've lost so many high-end players. There's no Drew Brees anymore, no Sean Payton, no Teron Armstead at left tackle, no Marcus Williams in the secondary. I mean, these are losses that would be hard for any team to overcome. And when you just put them all together, the Saints just don't look as good this year as they have in recent years. They have quarterback questions. Jameis Winston was looking solid last year before he suffered a torn ACL, but that was with Sean Payton. How is he going to do with just Pete Carmichael there? Maybe he continues to play well, but we've not seen Winston have sustained success, at least without a lot of turnovers during his career. So that's asking a lot. In the receiving core, they have Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, and Jarvis Landry, which looks good on paper. But Landry's regressed a bit recently. He's really more of a number 3 slot receiver right now. Michael Thomas has barely played the last couple of years, and Chris Olave is a rookie. So, that's kind of hard to rely on those guys to help prop up Winston. Kamara is still there, and he's still playing well, but he can only do so much, especially considering that the offensive line lost Teron Armstead, who the team has not been as good without. And I know they drafted Trevor Penning, and I like him, but I'm just not sure that he's going to be ready to be a high-level impact guy in his rookie year after playing at the FCS level and having just some issues with sacks and penalties. So might be some growing pains there. And defensively, they still have Demario Davis, which is very important because he's the glue that holds that defense together. But aside from him, they have Cameron Jordan, but their secondary is not as good as it once was because of the loss of Marcus Williams. They have Marshawn Lattimore, which he should do well, but I just don't see this defense as being as strong as it's been in recent years. They're going to be asked to do more. I think that's going to be a problem. So we saw them kind of top out at around 500, battle for that 7th seed last year. I don't think that they're going to come close to that this year. I think that they're really a 6-win team. Maybe if things break well for them, they could be better. Maybe they could get up to 500. And I don't feel good about this projection. This is just one of the quirks of when you predict every game in the schedule. There will be some teams that have really surprising records, but I have the Saints currently pegged as a 4-13 team. I would be shocked if that is actually the record they have at the end of the year, but I just don't think that they have the same ceiling they had under Sean Payton. They've just had so many losses, and they don't have any massive glaring holes, but they're not a team that has a lot of strengths to me. That's how I view them right now. Every position group they have has some sort of weakness or question around it. I feel like you can't say that about a lot of teams. So they have a very low floor, and their ceiling is still relatively high. Maybe they can climb up to a 500 record again, but I see them being on the lower end of the spectrum this year.
Yeah, we have a major disagreement for the first time. Although I agree with a lot of what you said, which is kind of strange because I had the Saints at 8-9, so you have them 4-13, 4-win difference. If you guys don't have your calculators handy, I think I like I said, I think you make a lot of great points. Like Teron Armstead being out is huge. Like they haven't been as good without him. Marcus Williams going. I mean, the guys they signed, Marcus May, Tyrann Mathieu, like they're good players, but they're not nearly as good as Marcus Williams. Cameron Jordan getting older. Sean Payton not being there anymore is huge. Jameis Winston, we'll see about his health. I'm not sure if he's 100%. Michael Thomas is a question mark. I mean, we Saints fans, I think, optimistically think he's going to be back to 100%, and he could be. But then again, he may not be the same receiver. Like there were questions about him last year, even playing before he got hurt. So we don't know what he's doing right now. Chris Olave is very promising, but he's only a rookie. So like I said, I think you make a lot of great points. I just think this team is like, I think this seems like okay. I think they're like average. I agree with what you said. Like not a lot of strengths outside of Kamara and Cameron Jordan, Damari Davis. Like they have some like really good players, but they don't have like a ton of strengths. But I think they have a lot of upside too. Like I think there's a chance that Michael Thomas comes back at 100% and Chris Olave plays well. And suddenly they have two really good receivers plus Landry in the slot. Like Landry's a great third receiver at this point in his career. And so they have those three guys. Let's say maybe Marcus May rebounds off of down 2021. And he plays well, maybe not as well as Marcus Williams would, but like maybe he's like 90%. His coaching staff has been around. I know they're not Sean Payton, but there is continuity there at least. Trevor Penning was a first-round pick, so maybe he has a good rookie year. Like I think the Saints have definite upside. I think they could get to 10 wins. I have them at 8. And probably maybe should have them at 7. Like I think their range is between 4 and 10. I think they have an extremely wide range. A lot could go well for them. A lot could go very poorly for them. It helps that they play in an easy conference, although their schedule isn't as easy as you might think, because they play the Rams, the Bengals, the Ravens, the Browns, and the Niners. Well, we'll see if Deshaun Watson plays for the Browns. That might be an easy game, but still, they have some tough divisional opponents. They do get to play the Falcons twice, and I guess they have Tom Brady's number, so I think they'll at least win one game against Tampa. But I think they have a wide range, and I think they could get to 8 wins. Maybe not somewhat easily, but I think it's definitely feasible. Like I said, I think 7 and 10 is probably their most likely projection. But I think they could get to 4 wins, like you said, if they bottom out. So, like I said, wide range of outcomes.
Yeah, and I think my big hang up is I look at them and I agree with you. They're an okay team, and like in normal circumstances, I probably should have them win 6 games. If I were to go back and redo my schedule, I probably would say, hey, like the Saints, they're not going to, like, I should not project them for 4 wins because that is their floor. I agree with you on that front. But I think I looked at their schedule and I just think it's going to be really hard for them because the way they open the year too with 3 divisional games. They start at the Falcons, then they're at home against the Buccaneers, and then they're on the road against the Panthers. We've seen Saints-Falcons games be difficult over the years, even when the Falcons haven't been as good as the Saints. I think the Buccaneers at home, we've been saying this for a while, the Buccaneers are going to want revenge on the Saints, but I think this time might be different. They might be able to get it because Sean Payton's not there, and they might just come out and be like, hey, we got to win this for Todd Bowles and just really punch the Saints in the mouth and just say, hey, you're not going to mess with us this year. So I think that 3-game start threw me off. And then after that, there are games against the Bengals, Steelers, Rams, 49ers, more games against the Buccaneers, like you mentioned. So I think that tough start to the season kind of turned me off to them, because I think that if they start slowly and they get to a point where it's like, oh, we're not really going to be a playoff team, I could see them kind of offloading some of their remaining veterans to try to trade them before the deadline. I know that's not super popular in the NFL. It's not like it is in the NBA or anything or MLB, but I think that this could be a rare circumstance where if the Saints bottom out, we see guys like Demario Davis get interest on the trade market, and maybe they leave and maybe the Saints bottom out and get a quarterback and try to reset the cap and rebuild. I think that would be the best case scenario for them, in my opinion, but they're definitely still going to try to compete because they don't want to have any down years. We've seen that based on their strategy.
Yeah, I think if someone were to get traded, I think Michael Thomas is right near the top of the list as well.
Good
point. Almost every year there's always one veteran team that doesn't meet expectations, and they bottom out at the end of the year. They kind of like they slack off because they had aspirations to go to the playoffs, and once they realize it's not going to happen, they just tend to quit. It's not like on the opposite is like a young team that's going to be trying very hard, like the Lions last year. Like the Lions were not a good team. They're terrible to start the year. They got blown out by the Niners, etc. Bengals and Eagles. But then second half of the year, they started playing very hard because they're a young team, new coach, very enthusiastic. I know the Saints have a new coach, but they've been there for a while. The Saints, I think, are one of the top candidates to do that. Like if they do start slowly, they could lose to the Falcons. I think they'll beat Atlanta, but let's just say they lose to the Falcons. The Buccaneers get their revenge, and the Panthers are, like we think they're better, and then they lose to the Bengals. Like they start 0-4. I think you could start to see a lot of locker room stuff coming out, and the Saints really just getting blown out on a weekly basis. So like that could happen, but then again, they could beat Atlanta and they could beat the Buccaneers again. Like they could start 2-0. Like I said, I think there's a wide range of outcomes for this team. But I think betting the under win total is good just in case they do bottom out. So yeah, I think it's funny that we disagreed on this team, but we kind of agreed at the end.
We agree in principle, but our record projection is different. But
right.
I feel like if we meet in the middle, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. So yeah, you said if you were redo the record, you get to 6-11. But your original was 4-13. Mine was 8-9. So if you average them together, we get 6-11. So that tends to work out. Last team in the division, the Falcons. If you're seeing this on YouTube, they're plus 2,006 to win the division. Do you have any interest in this?
No, I do not. The Falcons have so many problems. They're a long-term rebuild. They're without Matt Ryan for the first time in 15 years or something like that. And they just have so many weaknesses. We don't know who their quarterback's going to be. I think Marcus Mariota will beat Desmond Ridder to start the year, but if the Falcons are bad, which I expect will happen, Ridder's going to get some action. So we don't really know what we're going to see out of either guy. I think both of them are widely viewed as good leaders, and I think Marcus Mariota was viewed as an accurate quarterback. Desmond Ridder was a playmaker in college. Mariota was a little bit of that too, but I don't know if they're going to be able to succeed at the NFL level, and they don't have a lot to work with in terms of weapons. I like Pitts and Drake London, but Pitts is in his second year, and Drake London is in his rookie year, and he's coming off an ankle injury, so it might take time for London to get up to speed. So Pitts is going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting, unless the Falcons can get guys like Brian Edwards and Auden Tate and Olamide Zaccheaus to chip in and do a lot with this team. And I don't think that they have a good running game. Cordero Patterson was amazing last year and helped a lot of people win fantasy leagues, but he is a 31-year-old receiver convert to running back, I think he's 31. Yeah, he's 31 at this point. So I'm not sure that he's going to continue to find success as a running back. They drafted Tyler Algier or Algier to fit in as a compliment to him, but I just don't see anyone having a lot of success on this offense, especially given that their offensive line is very strong. And defensively, they're really still a work in progress there, too. They have Grady Jarrett. They also have A.J. Terrell and Casey Hayward in the secondary. I think that their cornerback room actually looks pretty decent, and maybe you could make a case that, hey, their secondary is not that bad. Problem is they don't have any pass rush at all, really, and at the linebacker level, they're probably going to move on from Deion Jones, who I think is battling an injury. I think that's going to make them worse short term because they don't have a lot of talent at linebacker. They'll be breaking in some young guys there. Troy Anderson they took in the second round was super productive in the FCS, but got to see if he can keep that up at the NFL level. But yeah, you look at this team and they really don't have many strengths. The only position that you could really argue is like a top 5 position group in the NFL is their kicker, Younghoe Koo, because he's got a big leg, he's pretty accurate, and he's probably the best onside kick artist in the league. So, hey, he's got a lot going for him, but you don't win games because of only your kicker in the NFL. I'm sorry to say that for kickers. So, but yeah, this team, I'm going to be interested to see how they do. I'm going to be interested to see if Arthur Smith, with a second year under his belt and with more players in that maybe fit the scheme he wants to run, I'll be interested to see how they do. He's brought in a couple former Titans like Rashaan Evans and Anthony Ferkser. So he's got some more familiar players there. But yeah, there are just too many problems with this team for them to win many games at all. They're going to challenge for the number 1 overall pick. I think there are teams in the NFL that are worse than them, but they're really not going to be good. They're going to be probably pretty hard to watch. And we're going to see exactly how much Matt Ryan served as a Band-Aid over all these other issues the last 3 years, because I think Matt Ryan's gotten an unfair shake. I'm also a Boston College fan with a Matt Ryan figurine right over my right shoulder here. Nice. So I might be a little biased, but I think we're going to see that, hey, he didn't get the fairest of shakes when people were saying he was declining because he had very little to work with.
Oh yeah, people were trashing Matt Ryan left and right, and you know he beat all the bad teams last year. They had no chance against the good teams, but against the bad teams, you know they beat the Jaguars and the Jets and the Dolphins when the Dolphins are struggling at least. Yeah, I mean you talked about top 5 positions. Like let's just go top 20. Like or like what positions outside of tight end, cornerback, and kicker like are the Falcons in the top 20? I can't think of one. Can you?
No, no, really. I can't. I'm looking over this roster and I don't see any that they would really be top 20, and they just have so little talent.
Yeah, it's pretty bleak for them. Although maybe you could argue it's good because they're going to get one of the quarterbacks in the 2023 draft. Yeah, this team is not going to be very competitive at all. And I mentioned cornerback. Like it looks good on paper, but Casey Hayward is going to be 33 in September. Like he could fall off a cliff. I love Terrell. I mean, he's a great player, but they really don't have anything else defensively. Their pass rush, we'll see. They have some young guys. Maybe they'll step up, but they only had 18 sacks last year. There were two players in the NFL who had more sacks than them collectively, which is so bizarre. Receiver is so bleak too. Drake London. He may not be 100% heading into the season. He has some injury issues heading into the draft. I like him long term, but in his rookie year, he may struggle a bit. So if he's not producing, you're counting on Auden Tate, Amir Byrd, Cardero Hodge to produce outside of Kyle Pitts. Like it is bad. And then Mariota is not going to get much blocking. Their offensive line's like not terrible, but it's not good either. So against good pass rushers, he's not going to stand a chance. Like linebacker, you said Deion Jones is on his way out. It is bad for the Falcons. But like I said, good in the long term. I think they're probably going to win 2 or 3 games.
Yeah, I have them at 3-14, which again, this is one of the things that makes me question the Saints getting 4 wins in my original projections, because I'm like, the Saints shouldn't be 1 win better than the Falcons. They're much better than the Falcons in terms of talent, but again, that's a problem I'll address in the later iterations of my win projections that'll be out later in the summer. But yeah, I just, there's nothing to like about this Falcons team really, except their future. Like you said, they might have a top 5 pick. In fact, they probably will have a top 5 pick. They might have the number 1 overall pick, but I will be interested to see how they fare. I like Arthur Smith as a coaching candidate. I liked him last year, and I think that he'll figure out a way to rebuild this team properly. But this is going to be probably the worst year of the rebuild for them, because they were forced to tear down on the fly once they got in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. It's amazing how many teams kind of destroyed themselves in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. Like half of the 4 rumored teams that were in on it are in bad shape. And then who knows how long Watson's going to be suspended for the Browns and what becomes of his contract if that happens. So, I mean, that whole situation is really just blown up in all these teams' faces.
Yeah, it's so bad. Yeah, the Falcons should have done this a couple years ago. Like when Matt Ryan was still like not declining, like they should have traded him and began anew. But they waited too long. But it'll work out in the long term. Once they get Stroud or Young in 2023, or if they do, I think they're going to start to gain some momentum, and they had to bottom out. So we have the odds at the bottom of the screen. I think we're in agreement that the Panthers are the best at plus 1291. Are you betting them? And are you going to bet any of these other ones? I suspect no.
I won't bet anyone besides the Panthers because they're at almost 13-1 odds here. I feel like why not take a chance on it, because all it takes is the Panthers to get a Baker Mayfield type, and they could really make a run at the postseason, and they could give the Buccaneers trouble. And, Tom Brady he's been invincible during his NFL career, and you could argue that he should have won MVP last year, but he's still 45 years old before the season starts. So maybe he could decline. If not, then that's fine. I wouldn't bet on it, but I think I would probably bet on the Panthers just in case. Like, what if he goes down with an injury, or what if his arm strength isn't what it once was, and they just don't win as many games? I think there's a world in which the Panthers can overtake the Buccaneers. It would take a lot of injuries and Tom Brady to not be his usual self, so it's not a good chance, but it's one worth taking a 13-1 chance on.
Yeah, it seems like great odds, 13-1. Obviously the Buccaneers should be favored, but the Panthers could definitely do it. I feel like the Saints and the Panthers should be flipped. Their odds should be flipped. If the Panthers were plus 349, I'd hesitate I hesitate about that. The Saints were plus 1291. I probably wouldn't do it, but at least think about it. So I think that's where the odds should be. Let's get to the AFC South, and I don't know why it's scrolling, but the Texans are plus 2820, the Colts minus 140. They're the favorites. The Jaguars plus 890, the Titans plus 156. So most people expect the Colts and the Titans to battle for this division. Maybe the Jaguars sneak in there, probably not the Texans. Who do you think is going to win this division?
Yeah, I reluctantly have the Colts down here. I've gone to the Colts repeatedly for like 5 years at this point, and it just has never panned out in its entirety. Even when they supposedly get the upgrades at quarterback, this is the one I'm highest on, or probably second highest on outside of Phillip Rivers. I really like Matt Ryan, and I think that he's going to stabilize the quarterback position for the Colts. Last year, Carson Wentz, he put up good numbers, but he made too many costly mistakes. We saw consistently he would have awful pick sixes or just take really bad sacks or just have his worst game at the worst time. And, that I know that problem isn't unique to Carson Wentz. That's happened to him over seasons with multiple teams. And that's why, we're all waiting with bated breath to see what he does in Washington, to see if he can do anything or if this is just who he is. But the Colts have tried so many alternatives at quarterback over the last 5 years. I think they've had a different week one starter like 5 or 6 years in a row now, that it's kind of hard to trust them to get things right. But I think Ryan's probably in good shape there. He's got good blocking in front of him. Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, and Braden Smith are good. Anthony Costanzo retired before last season, and they really missed him. Matt Pryor stepped in later in the year, and he played pretty well there. So I'm kind of confident that they can do well on the offensive line with him as their left tackle starter. They're also going to have to replace Mark Lewinsky, who left in free agency, the right guard. But I think that their offensive line is still solid. They have Jonathan Taylor at the running back position. He's going to be a huge weapon for Matt Ryan, take a lot of pressure off of him. So Ryan's going to have the best running game and pass blocking that he's had in a long time because of those two factors. The question is, what can the Colts get out of their receivers? Michael Pittman Jr. looks great. I think he's going to be a really good number one receiver for them. But the rest of the unit is unproven. Alec Pierce was a second-round pick. He's tall. He's fast. He looks like a guy that Matt Ryan could connect with. But we got to see that in action. Paris Campbell hasn't stayed healthy since being a second-round pick. And then just some of their other depth guys, Mike Strahan or Stretchan. I don't know how to pronounce that, I'll be honest. Desmond Patman, Ashton Tulin. Like, these are some good depth guys. They've proven to be effective backups. But without a proven number 2 and number 3 receiver, there's some risk to trusting this offense. And tight end, they lost. Jack Doyle retired. But they have a bunch of guys there. Mo Alley Cox, Kylan Granson, and Jelani Woods they drafted in the 3rd round this year. I like him. So I think their offense will be okay. Defensively, they need to get more pass rush pressure. That's why they traded for Unique Ngakoue. It's weird that I pronounce that one, but not Mike Strahan or whatever his name is. So I think that's going to help them a lot. Their secondary looks good. They've done what they've been doing in recent years and signed a veteran cornerback to fill their starting role. They got Stephon Gilmore, former defensive player of the year. He's not the same player he once was a couple years ago, but he's still a solid starter. So I think they're going to be happy with him. They have Kenny Moore. Darius Leonard had surgery, so we'll have to see how healthy he is. But this defense looks solid. They have good depth. They just need to hold up over the course of the season. They had some performances where they weren't as strong against the run, and they just need to get more pass rush pressure. I think they're going to get that from Ngakoue. I like them. I don't love them. I think that if they weren't in this division, I would probably maybe not have them in the playoffs, but that's the beauty of the NFL. Each division, one team makes the playoffs. I think it will be the Colts, but I don't have them winning double-digit games. I have them at 9-8, so it's not like I'm sold on them.
Yeah, I have them one win better at 10-7, so we're kind of in the same wavelength here. They had 2 issues last year. One you touched on with Carson Wentz throwing just backbreaking pick sixes. We'll never forget the pick six against the Titans in that home game in overtime when he had Jonathan Taylor open for a 20-yard gain. That would have taken them to midfield, and they would have been about 15 yards away from a field goal. And no, he had to throw in the triple coverage for the pick six. It was just so brutal. And, there's so many instances like that. He beat up on the bad teams like the Texans. And I guess the Jaguars the first time, but not the second time. Carson Wentz was a weakness for them. In some instances he was a strength. Like he had some good moments for sure, especially when he was throwing like deep bombs and there were always like pass interferences for some reason. So that was a strength at times, but he was mostly a weakness, I would say. And so Matt Ryan solidifies that. Like he doesn't have the upside that Carson Wentz does, but we haven't seen Carson Wentz's upside since he took that concussion from Jadeveon Clowney. And so like Ryan is just going to be like, his floor is just so much higher. And so I agree with what you said. His like running game is the best he's seen in a long time. Colts offensive line solid. So like he's going to have good players around him. Plus the receivers, Pittman should have a good year. We're hearing good reports on Paris Campbell, which is like, it's June, so that's bound to happen, and he's going to get hurt in August. Just like that always happens. And their second problem last year was their pass rush. They had the worst pressure rate in the AFC. That should be better. You talked about Yannick Ngakoue being there. That's going to be better. They traded Rock Yassin to get him, but they signed Stephon Gilmore to take his place. Gilmore, not what he once was, but he's still really good last year for the Panthers. I feel like he should have another solid year or two left in the tank. They got Rodney McLeod, who could be, pretty good. Kyrie Willis retired, which might hurt them in the secondary, but still, like this Colts team seems pretty solid. And I completely agree with what you said. Like if they were in the AFC West or AFC North, I would say like no way they're making the playoffs, or maybe like a slim chance. But in the AFC South, it's gonna come down to them or the Titans, I think, unless the Jaguars surprise. And I feel like they're a little bit better than the Titans right now, so I'm giving them the slight edge to win the division.
Yeah, I feel like if you swap the Colts and the Raiders, like teams in their divisions, I'd be like really excited about the Raiders. I'd be like, yeah, they're great. They could go 12-5 in this division. And when we talked about the AFC West, we would have written off the Colts. So, but yeah, that's just the way the cookie crumbles in the NFL sometimes. But yeah, I totally agree with you on the Colts. The pass rush issue was massive. That's why I think the Yassin for Ngakoue swap made a lot of sense for them. The Colts have done well at digging up cornerbacks too. Like they drafted Isaiah Rodgers out of my alma mater, UMass, a couple years ago, and he's become a really good return man. And I think they started him at corner a few times last year, and he did pretty well and got some interceptions. So they've been better at scouting and finding cornerbacks as opposed to finding pass rush. So I think that ended up being a good move for them, and that might be enough to just put them over the top in this division.
Okay, so you say over the top. Are you talking about the Titans, or do you think the Jaguars will make a run?
I think it's the Titans. I like the Jaguars. The Jaguars, we'll get into this more in a bit, but they have a wide range of outcomes for them. But I think the Titans have cut their teeth as a playoff team the last few years. Mike Vrabel's an excellent coach. They were the 1 seed in the AFC last year, which is hard to believe when you look at the strength of the conference right now, because no one in their right mind would say, hey, the Titans, they're the number 1 team in the AFC, right? But now they are. They're going to have a tough road ahead of them. They've made some confusing moves this offseason. I think they've been cap strapped a little bit, which has been part of their problem. That's the Tannehill contract for you. He's not a great quarterback. He's just a guy you can get by with a strong roster, but the roster around him's being degraded a bit, or it's coming apart because they've had to get rid of guys like A.J. Brown, who wanted a new contract that the Titans weren't really able to give him. So they replaced him with Treylon Burks, who projects to literally be the same player, according to Daniel Jeremiah, in terms of player comps. But, one is proven and one isn't. So you get the unproven guy, which is not a great trade-off. We'll see what happens there. They have Robert Woods. That was a good move, but he's coming off a torn ACL. So you have to see how healthy he is. So their receiving core looks like a big wild card. Their offensive line, they've lost 2 starters up front. They lost Roger Saffold and David Quessenberry, 2 very good veterans. Quessenberry is the bigger loss, in my opinion, because he was one of the top 10 run blockers in the league last year. That matters when you have Derrick Henry out there. And I know a lot of people will point to Quessenberry and say he had like 13 sacks given up last year. Yeah, he wasn't great in pass protection, but for the Titans, if you're addressing this team, they need to be run first because they have Derrick Henry. So losing one of the best run blocking linemen in the league when he wasn't on that expensive of a contract was not a good choice on their their part. And they've not done they've not added proven guys to replace them. They have Dylan Radins, who was a second-round pick in 2021, and Nick Petit-Frere, who they drafted in the third round this year. But those guys are not proven. So if they have trouble blocking and they still let up pressure on Tannehill, things could get ugly for that passing game there, and the running game might not be as good. The running game is probably the strength for this team. Derrick Henry should be back, should be healthy. We'll see if he comes back after that foot injury, and he'll be the same dominant self that he was before in all likelihood. We just got to see if he still has the same high-end gear, if he's going to be a guy who has to run through tackles more. Because if it's the latter, he might be prone to injuries. They drafted Hassan Haskins, who's another big back. I liked that move because I think that'll allow them to take a little bit of pressure off of Henry and say, hey, let's give you a rest and let's give this big dude who can take contact and give him some carries too. So I'm not sold on their offense. I like their run game. That's about it. Everywhere else, I feel like they're in worse shape than they were last year. Defensively, I like the team. They have good pass rush. Nico Autry, Jeff Simmons, Bud Dupree, Harold Landry. All these guys can get pass rush pressure, which is good because the secondary for the Titans is their weakness at cornerback. We'll see if their young players there make strides, but I think if they're going to win, it's going to be because of their defense and their running game. We've seen that in recent years. It's not going to be because of Tannehill. But I don't think that they're going to have as much success because they don't have explosive playmakers at receiver. Their offensive line is worse. And Tannehill has not progressed at any point. He's been a solid starter. That's been it. I don't think he's going to carry them to a lot of wins against a very strong AFC. So I have them at 8-9, one game back of the Colts. But again, in any other division, I would not be talking about the Titans as a potential playoff team.
Yeah, we're one win away apart again, where I have them the 9-8. So the Colts barely edge out the Titans to win the division. I compared the Panthers to the Browns from 2020 earlier, and I think I want to make another comparison to another AFC North team, but from years before that. I think this Titans team reminds me of the Bengals when they were starting to make their decline. The Bengals, remember, under Marvin Lewis, they had so much talent. In fact, I talked to one of our sources that I met through Charlie. And like we're just talking about, like, you know, past football teams, and he's like, I can't believe the Bengals didn't at least get to the Super Bowl with that roster. There's such amazing talent on that team. And I'm like, Andy Dalton. He's like, yep. And so that's what held them back. And it was Ryan Tannehill who's held them back, the Titans back the past few years. Titans had the number one seed, like you said, and he just couldn't do anything against the Bengals this past January. And now it looks like the Titans are in decline, kind of like the Bengals were in Andy Dalton's later years on that franchise. Like they lost AJ Brown. That's enormous. Yeah, they drafted Treylon Burks, but he can't breathe for some reason. Like, I know they're saying he has asthma, but like, I don't know. I mean, he suddenly can't breathe. Like, I feel like we would have heard that before. Their run blocking, like you said, is not going to be nearly as good. They lost the 2 offensive linemen you touched on. The defense is still going to be great. I think I don't really see any weaknesses there. A cornerback maybe, but I think they have some promising players who could pan out from the corner. So their defense isn't an issue. It's their offense. And you could look at like Ryan Tannehill's stats. Like, he scored a lot of rushing touchdowns last year. But, you know, that was a byproduct of AJ Brown plus a better offensive line. He's going to have worse blocking. He's going to have worse receivers at his disposal. And I think a worse running game because, you know, with Questenberry gone and Saffold gone, Derrick Henry's not going to have nearly as many running lanes. I think he's still going to run extremely well, but it's not going to be overly dominant like it was last year or the year before, or at least until Henry got hurt last year. So the Titans are not going to be nearly as good. The one saving grace they have is a weak division. They could win it again. And Mike Vrabel's a great coach, and he could definitely get them to win this division. And I feel like if they do, they'd be great fate in the first round of the playoffs because I don't see them doing anything against a better team. But, you know, they could win the division, like I said. And I think they're probably the best bet here at plus 156, unless you like the Jaguars. But I would not bet the Colts at minus 140. I think I'd bet whoever the underdog was.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that one. It doesn't make sense to bet the Colts at minus 140. It's not like they're significantly better than the Titans. It's going to be a 2-horse race in this division. And In all likelihood, maybe the Jaguars emerge as a third, but I'm just not super high on either of these teams. I will say this though, I think that the Titans defense of any of the units on the Colts and Titans, I think their Titans defense is the best of the bunch. I also think their offense is the worst of the 4 units, so that's kind of where all these projections get made. It's because the Colts have what seems like the more balanced roster, but Titans could dominate with their defense. And what you said about the corners rings true to me. Like, I think that their weakness is at cornerback, but they have just so many young players there. They have top 3 draft picks from in 2020, 2021, 2022. There are 4 players picked within the first 3 rounds projected to be their starters there. If they grow and improve, that unit could be insanely good with the pass rush talent they have.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go to the Jaguars. You said they have a wide range of outcomes. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, so I think that their floor is probably as like a 3-win team again. I think that they're going to be better than that. I think that they should be better than that, but I'm not betting on it yet because I have them at 4-13. This is another 4-13 team that I feel like should have a better record in my next projections. I think they came out just a little low this time because I was trying to discount the AFC South. And I think that they have a harder schedule than people realize. But I think that they're going to be better this year by default because Doug Peterson is there and not Urban Meyer. And for all the faults and flaws that Doug Peterson might have, he's much better than Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer was a walking catastrophe for the Jaguars. I mean, it was like Hurricane Urban enters the room. He kicks a kicker. And now he's in a bar and just insane stuff. Like, it's just crazy. Like, the greatest reality TV show you've ever seen was Urban Meyer with the Jaguars. And it was just insanity. But so I think that they're going to be better by default. But Peterson's still has some shortcomings. And I think that, we need to see him do a lot of good work with Trevor Lawrence because Lawrence did not look comfortable as a rookie. He was under a lot of pressure. He turned the ball over a lot. I think he's going to be better. He's going to improve. He just has so much talent, and he should be willing to put in the work for Peterson as opposed to Meyer. I think a lot of the veterans and even the young guys in Jacksonville's locker room last year saw what was happening with Meyer and was like, this is never going to work. Like, what are we even bothering trying? So they gave up. That's why they were the worst team in the league last year. But they have talent. They still have Marvin Jones, and I know they overpaid for a lot of the free agents they brought in, but they've added talent in terms of like Christian Kirk coming in, Zay Jones. Like, these guys are overpaid, Evan Ingram, but that's going to add a pop to their offense. They also added Brandon Sheriff to the offensive line, and I think that's going to make a big difference because now they at least have a quality starter on the interior, but they lost Brandon Linder to retirement at center. That was a bummer. If they had kept him and drafted another guard, their interior line could have been really good. But now their line's just kind of okay. They're okay at tackle, and they have Sheriff, but they still have a couple holes to fill. Defensively, it's hard to love what they have there. I mean, they have good players at each level, and they've added some talent. They added Foye Oluokun, Darius Williams, Foley Fatukasi, but these aren't like the big name acquisitions that when you and I were like, they're good Super Bowl sleepers. These are not the guys we thought they were going to sign. These are like maybe some solid starters, some good role players. They had to overpay them because the Jaguars are a mess right now. So they're really missing some of the high-end talent that we hoped that they'd have. Their linebacker room looks pretty good. They drafted Devin Lloyd and Chad Muma, so they'll find a way to use those guys. Trayvon Walker across from Josh Allen could end up being pretty good. We got to see what Walker can do. He's the number 1 overall pick, but it was a weak year at the top of the draft. So we'll see on defense. I'm not overly high on it. I think the offense has more potential. If they're going to win games, it's because Trevor Lawrence is showing out. And I think that if Trevor Lawrence really leaps forward this year, the Jaguars could post a winning record because they're in a weak division. And if they make that big step forward, maybe they're better than all their divisional counterparts on offense. They could go 4-2 in the division and maybe post a 9-8 record. I don't think that they quite get to 10-7 or anything this year. I think their schedule is a little bit too difficult for that with their other AFC opponents. But I could foresee them going 9-7. I could also, or 9-8 now. Forgive me for forgetting that there are 17 games in the season. But I think that they could also bottom out in 3-14 if Lawrence struggles picking up another new system and really takes another year of development before he's able to get on his feet. So I think there's a 6-win swing for the Jaguars where they could either be one of the 5 worst teams in the NFL or challenge for a playoff spot in this week division. I tend to think it's going to be closer towards the 5 worst teams in the league just because of where they're at right now. I think the most likely result is 6 or 7 wins, like a nice step forward. But I'm if I had to bet right now, I would say that they're going to go 4-13. That is a little on the low end of the spectrum, but I just don't have a lot of faith right now. Maybe it'll change when we get to August if things are sounding good around Peterson.
Yeah, it's pretty funny because last year there was so much hype with the Jaguars. They were favored in Houston in week 1, and it was just crazy because they got blown out. But people expected them to maybe not make the playoffs, but like compete for a playoff spot, maybe go 6-11, 7-10, and they obviously had the first pick in the draft, so it didn't really work out for them. But I think if you were to like get every football fan from this time last year and like time travel them to now and like show them the players that they added, like obviously not great players, but like Brandon Sharp's good. Like Christian Kirk has upside as a deep threat. Evan Ingram has some upside. Darius Williams, good cornerback. Then Trayvon Walker, Devin Lloyd, like these are good draft prospects. Luke Fortner should help on the offensive line. Like if you were to take that hype from last year and like add to their roster and then say Urban Meyer sucks, they got a better coach by default, I think people would be like, oh, this team could maybe win 9 games, right? Like, and especially in a weak division. But we saw them struggle so much last year. Trevor Lawrence didn't have a prayer behind that offensive line, and once DJ Chark went down, he didn't really have a real receiver. And Marvin Jones is there, but he was pretty washed up, and Laviska Shenault was running bad routes the whole time. But they have better receivers now. They have Sheriff. It should be an upgrade as long as he's healthy, and we'll see what they have in Fortner. I like the front 7 players that they added. And Darius Williams should be an upgrade at cornerback. So I think the Jaguars have potential. I think I agree with what you said about a wide range of outcomes, but I think I'd lean toward them being better than being worse. I think there's a better chance that they're on the 9-8 end of the spectrum rather than the 4-13 end of the spectrum. I think their most likely record is probably going to be like 7-10. So I like this team. I like a pretty decent amount. I think they're going to be good value betting wise to start the year because I think people are going to expect them to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. I don't think that's the case anymore. But it's still disappointing what they did in free agency. Like we expected so much better out of them. They had so much money to spend, and they overpaid for mediocre players. Still, I guess mediocre is better than what they had last year, so you could say that. But still, it is disappointing. But I think they can make a good improvement over what they had last year.
Yeah, and I think you're probably closer to being right with your record projection than I am. Let me put it like this, though. When I was I got myself into trouble when projecting the AFC South in this because somehow, I don't know how, I wasn't paying attention. I don't pay attention to the records that I end up with when I project the first 6 weeks of the season, so I try not to bias myself. The Titans ended up 0-5 in their first 5 games, so I was scrambling to get them wins. So I think I had them sweep the Jaguars, and I think I had the Colts sweep the Jaguars. I don't know if that necessarily happens. So maybe they pick up some more division wins. But yeah, I found myself in trouble. So the projections I trust the least that I've made so far is the AFC South. I think that it's just going to be tough to predict this division in general because it's the worst in the NFL. And I like the Jaguars upside. I agree with you. I think if Trevor Lawrence takes that step forward, sure, they could get to 9 wins, and that could be enough to win this division. But it's just so hard to figure out how they're going to do all these teams because we've seen the same story with the Colts repeatedly. The Titans, we've seen. I like your comparison to the Dalton Bengals. I think that they've put themselves in a bad situation with that Tannehill contract. That's why these mid-tier quarterback contracts need to be a thing again. If Tannehill was making $15 million a year, you're probably not in this scenario. You're in a much better shape. Yeah. But the Jaguars, they have talent. They have some good stuff with them, but they've got to put it all together and just see what they can do after a very toxic year.
Yeah, I don't know who it was. Someone recommended to me or suggested to me that make an article saying that there should be 2 salary caps in the NFL, one for quarterbacks and one for the rest of the team, because these teams get in trouble with signing these quarterbacks, and they're in such a pickle because, like, on one hand, like you're going to be in trouble by giving players like Tannehill way too much money, but on the other hand, if you let him go and you don't have a viable replacement, like, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So it's really, you put them in a tough spot. So I think that the NFL should maybe look into that, maybe exclude quarterback from the salary cap or something.
Yeah, or discount it at the very least. That
Right.
might be a good approach to take.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
you see teams adjust these cap hits for their high-end paid quarterbacks every year by extending them, which just lengthens the problem. So if you could find a way to just discount the quarterback cap hit, or you have the ability to discount like 2 players cap hits on your team per year, I think that would do a lot to help teams.
Yeah, I think at least one. Be like, you should be able to designate one player on your roster who doesn't count against cap. I think that'd be good. But,
yeah, because every team would just use it for their guy with the highest cap hit, and you can change it year to year.
Right.
I actually really think that would benefit all teams, because even teams with a rookie quarterback could say, like, all right, I have Khalil Mack on the roster at this hit. Well, not anymore. He's there, but we have more cap space.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's get to the last team. I'm going to preface this like I did with the Falcons. The Texans are plus 2,820. That means if you bet $10,000, you can win $282,000. Do you have any interest in this?
No. As much as I love long shot bets, I don't think that the Texans have any chance of winning this division. Hey, maybe Davis Mills turns out to be a great quarterback. I mean, he looked good as a rookie. You can make a case that he was better than most of the first-round quarterbacks not named Mac Jones last year, which I think shocked a lot of people. But he just doesn't have a lot of talent around him. Brandon Cooks has been a stable receiver, despite moving around, being traded a few times. He's posted a lot of 1,000-yard seasons. He's had some injury concerns with concussions, but he stayed on the field a lot in recent years. So that's really the one weapon they have, though. There's no running back talent. They drafted Dameon Pierce. They have Marlon Mack. Like, I mean, maybe that pans out. We've seen Mack look good in the past. He was coming off an injury last year and didn't do much, but I don't know. I would have liked them to have someone higher upside in that backfield to help out Mills. I also would have liked them to do a little more to upgrade their offensive line. They drafted Kenyon Green in the first round, and I think Kenyon Green's going to be a good player. He's going to be a good guard, but that was a little bit of a reach at 15, so we'll see if that ends up panning out. But their offensive line on the right side isn't that great. It was better when Titus Howard was inside at guard, but I don't think that they have a true right tackle option, which makes the Green selection all the more strange, because they could have gotten maybe Trevor Penning, who I don't think will be good this year, but could be good in the future, or might, let me rephrase, will have trouble this year, but should be good in the future, as opposed to Green. Defensively, they're still rebuilding there. The secondary looks decent. If Derek Stingley and Jalen Petrie, their first 2 draft picks, pan out, that secondary is going to be pretty good. The problem is that their front 7 is pretty devoid of talent. They don't have much pass rush at all. They have Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison, 2 guys who came over from Buffalo, which is really weird. Like, they're veterans. Like, I don't know why they're on Houston. I feel like they could have gotten, with respect to Houston, better gigs than that. But yeah, those guys are past their prime at this point. And really, you just look at their defense, and it's a collection of veterans that maybe Lovie Smith can get something out of, like we saw last year, but they really do not have much high-end talent. If Stingley pans out, that'll be good. But aside from that, they really don't have much. So I like their secondary. Okay. I don't like really anything else about their defense. I like Davis Mills. Okay. I don't like much about his weaponry. His protection on the O-line is decent, but yeah, there's just not much to like about this team. I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. And if Davis Mills falls flat on his face this year, teams figure him out after really probably ignoring the Texans for most of last year, he could have a rough go of it. So I'm not high on their potential. I think I have them winning 2 games this year. That Texans versus Bears game that is going to happen during the season, I think that's going to be an important one for deciding the number 1 overall pick in this draft.
Yeah, when you were talking about Madison and Hughes taking the Texans job, I was secretly hoping that you would compare them to the 9 Inch Nails playing at the Roadhouse, but like only maybe one person would watching this would get that. So yeah, I agree with what you said about this Texans team. I mean, half their wins last year came against the Jaguars, and the Jaguars are going to be better. So I don't think they're going to sweep the Jaguars again. Maybe they'll get one win, but last year you had Lovie Smith, who's I don't think he's a good head coach by any means, but he's a good defensive-minded coach, and he was able to fool Trevor Lawrence in both matchups. But now Lawrence is going to have more experience, so I don't see the Texans doing that again. The Texans, I don't think they're as bad as the Falcons and the Bears. I think they're maybe a slight step up from them, but it's not much of a step. They have some good players. Their left side of their offensive line should be good. Brandon Cooks, as long as he stays healthy, is going to be a nice receiver, but there's nothing else at receiver. Maybe Marlon Mack has some nice flashes like he had before he got replaced by Jonathan Taylor. And their secondary, we'll see about Derek Stingley's ability to stay healthy. Jalen Petrie is a rookie. You touched on those guys. I just don't know where their pass rush is going to come from. I think they're going to struggle to stop the run. And Davis Mills, he had some nice moments last year, but he also had some rough moments as well. I remember him getting shut out by the Bills. I think it was 40-0, I think. And then they got trashed by the Colts. So against better teams, I don't think the Texans are going to stand a chance. And then, I think they might win a couple games in the division. So I think they can get to 3 or 4 wins. I think that's probably the sweet spot for them. Like you mentioned, they play the Bears, they play the Jets, the Jaguars twice. So they have some winnable games. But I don't see them getting more than 4 wins. I think 2-15, 3-14 is probably where they're going to end up.
Yeah, I think the 2 to 4 win range is probably the best place to put them at this point. I think maybe if they pull off a massive upset, they could get to 5-12, and that would be a real feather in Lovie Smith's cap, as weird as that sounds. But yeah, I think 2 to 4 wins is probably how it's going to shake out. If I wasn't so desperate to get the higher end teams in the division wins, I probably might have the Texans at 3 or 4, but I'm going to have to redo my AFC South projections to make them make sense a little more and not have the Titans start 0-5 because that doesn't make any sense.
I don't know if the Titans are going to start well either. So I agree with you on that. What do you think about these odds? Obviously we're not betting the Texans, and you mentioned the Colts not really seeming appealing at -140. What about the Jaguars at +890 and the Titans at +156? Do you have any interest in betting those?
I would consider both of them. I probably wouldn't bet the Jaguars right now just because I want to see how they do. I don't think that number is going to move significantly to start the season. If Trevor Lawrence comes out of the gate and throws 5 touchdowns in the first game for 400 yards, these odds might shift, but I don't think it's going to be anything crazy out of the box. I think I'd rather see how they develop there. I think I would bet the Titans at +156 at this point, because they're a veteran-laden team with a proven head coach in Mike Vrabel, who's one of the best in the NFL and has done a really good job with that defense. And I think they're going to be in the running for the division title no matter what. And that would position you later in the season if the Titans are in first place ahead of the Colts. You could hedge it if the Colts get to +150 or something like that. Then you'd have a really good chance at getting the division winner and profiting here. Maybe you could throw the Jaguars into the mix, but I'd rather wait and see. I don't think they're going to get to a point where they're +150 unless it looks like they're really going to win the division. So I would rather see how they look out of the gate before betting them.
Yeah, I think I have some interest in betting the Jaguars. I like the Panthers a lot more at +1291, but the Jaguars at +890 seem appealing to me because I think this is what their odds were last year. But now the Titans are substantially worse than what they were last year. The Colts are, I think the Colts are about the same, maybe slightly better. But I think the Jaguars, I'd say the right number for them would probably be +400, +450. I think there's a lot of value with +890, and I think they're at Washington week 1. That's definitely a winnable game, and if they win that, suddenly their odds are going to be a lot worse. So I think the Jaguars are worth betting at +890. I also like the Titans at +156 a little bit, as I mentioned. Not in love with it though. I don't think I'm going to bet that. But it would be nice to get both the Titans and the Colts at plus odds. Although the Jaguars might ruin that. So I think if there's one team from this division I would bet is the Jaguars at plus 890. I think I'd shop around a little bit and try to find a plus 1,000 somewhere.
Yeah, if you get plus 1,000, I might like it. The thing with the Jaguars, for me, I look at the first 4 games of their season. That game against Washington is winnable, but I have some worries about that's a Carson Wentz, like, prove it revenge game type deal. So he's going to be extra motivated for that. Maybe that could mean nothing. That could mean absolutely nothing. But I think that given that they're at home, that might, if the Jaguars lose that could hurt them, because then they play the Colts. Then they have games against the Chargers and the Eagles on the road. So I think they could be underdogs for those next 3 games. There's a world in which they might start 0-4. There's also a world in which they might start 3-1. And my plan to like try to wait and see if I could hedge with longer odds could be quashed. But I think I'm willing to wait. I think it's more because I don't really want to care about the AFC South that much, because I think this division's going to be pretty bad. But I think that the Jaguars, I'll say this, are the best value. I think that the Titans are the most realistic, or the best mesh of value and realistic chance of winning the division.
Yeah, we agree on that. That week 1 game is a little weird. It's the Redskins are favored by 4. It seems like the sportsbooks really want you to bet Washington in that game. I was looking at the betting odds, and it's like nearly 3/4 of the money is on Washington right now. And it just the line seems so low. It's like they're really enticing betting on the home team there. And I think the Jaguars might walk away with from that game with a win. And then week 2, they play the Colts, and the Jaguars have had the Colts number for some reason. And yeah, but what if they start 2-0? Like suddenly they start looking pretty good. I don't think they're going to beat the Chargers. You said the Eagles and Chargers. So they might start 2-2. But I think there's a chance they start 2-0 to start the year. So yeah, I mean, the Jaguars are sounding like a pretty decent value to me.
Yeah, waiting was definitely a risk in my plan, but I view both of those first 2 games as massive revenge games for Carson Wentz, and then the Colts against the Jaguars. So I just worry about, but the Jaguars are going to be motivated to prove themselves. So I'm not saying they're not going to be motivated, but I worry about the motivation having like real high levels from their opponents. And the Washington in week 1 could be like, hey, we got to get Carson this win, because this will build his confidence and really help him kind of put the Jaguars in his rear view. But I think I'm gonna be interested to see how they do in the first month of the season, though, because I would like to see them do well, because I like Doug Peterson. I want Trevor Lawrence to succeed. So who knows? Maybe by August you'll convince me to bet the Jaguars at this type of number.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll get a better number. So, yeah, that is it for the NFC South and AFC South. Next week, we're going to talk about the North teams, so better divisions. I'm looking forward to that. Please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video. Jacob, do you have anything to plug?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Camenker. I will be tweeting my NFL thoughts as usual. I also have golf betting articles. I don't know if I'll have one this week because I was off today and yesterday. USFL playoffs are coming up, so I'll be covering those. But my U.S. Open pick, Matt Fitzpatrick, he was my 3rd ranked golfer in the field, despite being the 18th ranked in the world, and he won. So keep an eye out for my golf betting. I'm on somewhat of a hot streak there. And yeah, if you have any football questions, though, send them my way on Twitter at Jacob Camenker. If I see them, I'll do my best to answer them. And soon enough, you'll be seeing my fantasy advice and articles and all the fun stuff that we do in the months before the preseason starts. So looking forward to getting that started.
Yeah, training camp is about a month away, so looking forward to that as well. Yeah, and I'll say that you definitely call a good call on the M Fitzpatrick guy winning the golf tournament. I had him in my DraftKings lineup, so that was definitely a great call on your part. I'm at walterfootball.com. Tons of fantasy content coming up soon. Season previews every day, so you get more detailed analysis on each team, plus projected record and whatnot. Charlie's posting great content for the draft. We just updated our 2023 NFL mock drafts, updated 2022 NBA mock drafts coming tomorrow, I believe. So, yeah, tons of content at walterfootball.com. But otherwise, I'll talk to you next week.
All right. Sounds good. Talk to you then.